Tchinde led the willing Yautja into battle as the light grew shallow on the arid world. The Kwei humans had barricaded themselves behind a heavy door, their stingers on the outside but controlled from within. Their weapons were hot and deadly. Their fire had already taken 2 of the warriors before Tchinde had decided to pull back and organize a stronger attack. Tricky devils, to hide behind the door and kill from a distance. There were now only 6 other students left. They crouched behind one of the Uman structures and looked to him for command. Any doubt Tchinde had felt after watching 2 of his Yautja fall evaporated as he saw the eager hunters before him. Monday and Daakde had been slow and foolish, but these warriors would go on to the victory hunt. Skildasi, you will be Hultha and stand behind. Skildasi had the best eyes. They would need sharp vision to watch for any Uman who might be waiting to ambush. The Yautja tilted his head and stepped away from the rest. It is time for the hunt of Nainde, the new leader growled. He raised his voice steadily as he spoke the truth aloud to the others. Time to kill until the Pio de Amada trophies sit on our spears, until their thwei flows in our honour and the fight is done. 1,000 stories will be sung in our name, for we will conquer. Tchinde flared his mandibles in pleasure at the low hisses that came from his warriors. They were ready. It was Itadete who began the chant of Midnight Kiss. One by one, the Yautja raised their spears and voices to the sky. The screams true and harsh in the dry, dead air of the human world. Tchinde howled loud and long with his warrior brood. The soft meat would die in scores this night, and he would lead the slaughter. The hunt was all. Noguchi scrabbled backward on her elbows from the bizarre attacker. There's nothing there. Even as the thought popped into her head, the magnified dust rippled and changed. One of the warriors suddenly towered over her, its thick arms high over its head. The spear it held was pointed at her. Earlier, in the ship, she had forgotten in her panic that she'd had a rifle strapped on her back. She remembered now. She swung the heavy rifle up. Too slow. Time expanded, flowed like thick oil. It took a millennium to thrust the weapon against her shoulder and aim. Darkness sprang and covered the dragon. From the main well structure behind the creature, the metallic black bugs shrieked and swarmed and fell on him, their talons fast and sharp. Noguchi had not even seen them there, hadn't heard them come. It didn't matter. She jumped to her feet and stumbled backward, watched as the warrior hit the ground and screamed horribly. The nightmare insects cried and tore at their prey. A pale green fluid, the dragon's blood, sprayed the dark animals. They threw back their obscenely long heads and screamed. Fuck this. Noguchi turned and ran. Roth stood behind Kathy at the ops panel near the south lock when Ackland shouted from his position near the heavily fortified entry. Get ready, something's coming. Roth gave Kathy's shoulders a light, reassuring squeeze before she picked up her carbine and joined the other men and women at the door, Creep at her heels. Her heart thudded dully in her chest as she ran the dozen meters or so. Hiroki's broadcast had been coming in from the ops console for the last 20 minutes or so. His team was doing their best to ward off the attackers, but they had wasted a lot of their ammo on thin air. The going belief was that the alien creatures had some kind of invisibility cloak. The camera angle was such that only a few of the team could be seen, not what they were fighting. Roth took a position toward the front of the group and trained her weapon on the reinforced plexi door, arms ready. The tension around her was heavy. They didn't know enough about the aliens, what they were after, or what they could do. Maybe they wouldn't be so easy to kill. Reuben Hine, one of the geotechs, was on watch. His face was pressed closely to the loophole in the wall. He held up one of his dark hands for silence as the seconds ticked by. Roth felt a trickle of sweat run down the nape of her neck. She closed one eye, finger rested lightly on the trigger. It's okay, don't shoot, Hine called. It's Noguchi. Roth hadn't realized how nervous she'd been until his words flooded her with cool relief. She and the others lowered their weapons and stepped back from the door. Noguchi had obviously been in a fight. Her clothes were rumpled and dusty. Her normally sleek hair was plastered to her head in strings, her face flushed. She walked in quickly and surveyed the situation. Did you see them? What the hell are they? How many were there? Ackland half blocked her entrance, his red face betraying the fear he was hiding. Too many, said Noguchi. She turned to the assembled group of ranchers and company people and spoke clearly, her voice one of authority. Fall back to the inner doors and get someone with a welding torch over here. Seal all of the doors, upper level 2, except the east lock, and no one goes in or out without my authorization. She looked at Hein. Are we organised enough to get this done without tripping over each other? He nodded. I'll make sure of it. Are the children here? Lauren Gaunt spoke up. Yeah, they're eating back in the conference room with Davidson and Johnson. Noguchi exhaled slightly, and some of the tension left her shoulders. She picked out Spanner in the crowd and walked over to him, her revolver extended, butt first. Please load this for me, and get me some extra rounds for it. More of the armour-piercing hunting rounds, like it had before. He took the weapon carefully. How much extra ammo do you think you'll need? 10 speed loaders, and seal those doors ASAP. She walked back towards the ops panel, not noticing the effects her words had had on the group. 10 speed loaders? A low murmur rippled through the room. Roth followed Noguchi to the back to tell Kathy what was going on. The Japanese woman stopped near the board and spoke calmly to one of the staffers. Downey, do you have any of that sat link hooked up yet? Little Signy's still interfering, but it'll be below the horizon in the next hour. Noguchi nodded at that and turned to Weaver. What do you have on the cameras? Can you get me a fix on Hiroki and his team? Kathy stepped up behind Roth and grabbed her hand, both of them watching the conversation. Weaver looked up at Noguchi slowly and said nothing. Her brimming eyes said enough. Noguchi threw her comset on the panel and took the one that Weaver held out. She stood behind Weaver's chair and looked at the scant visual. Hiroki, this is Michiko, do you read? Her voice held an edge of panic. From their position, both Kathy and Roth could see what little there was on the small screen. A medkit lay open on the floor, its contents scattered. There was a white cable in one corner of the visual, which Roth realised with dawning horror was a human arm. The body of the fallen person was off screen. Kathy's grip tightened in hers. Muted sounds of gunfire rattled through the comm. Hiroki, this is Michiko, do you... Go? The reception was terrible, but Roth felt her spirits lift slightly. He wasn't dead. Bzzz, you in the tower? Friedman, get down! More static. Noguchi grasped the comm tightly, as if doing so would help somehow. She spoke in a rush. It was maybe the first time Roth had seen her with her cool exterior completely blown. The nitrogen queen was terrified. Listen, Hiroki, tell your team to stand by. We're going to open the doors and pull you in. Do you read me? Tell your team to stand by. Hiroki had backed up so that the part of his profile was visible in the screen. He held a rifle aimed off screen and pulled the trigger uselessly. No time, he spoke in half a shout. On screen, Hiroki held the rifle up by its barrel, like a club. Static. Team left. Anyway, Just and Friedman. Static. I don't think we've hit any... Them. Ammo's gone. Us too. He said something else, but his words were drowned out by the sound of breaking plexi. Hiroki held his empty rifle higher. Someone, Friedman, shouted off screen. They come! Stay safe, much... Static. Roth watched as huge, dark shapes, the alien warriors, swarmed onto the screen. Hiroki brought the rifle down, hard, to no effect. The attacker he had tried to fend off knocked him to the floor easily, as if he were a child. Mercifully, he fell out of the camera's range, but the pool of red blood that flowed sluggishly into view must have come from Hiroki. Noguchi made a strangled sound deep in her throat and looked away. And then Kathy was crying, and Roth turned to comfort her as best she could. The mighty Yapja burst through the shoddy Uman defences with no further losses. There were only 2 of the soft meat still upright, and they fell in the span of a breath. Tichinde himself took out the smaller of the 2. The human tried to stop him with a dead burner, like a staff. There was no contest. The new leader relished the decapitation of the small creature. It had put up a fight, however meagre. Its skull would look fine on Tichinde's trophy wall, once it was polished clean of the sticky, pale flesh. Tichinde howled, the head of the Uman still dripping thwei from his spear. Perhaps the soft meat were not so deadly as the Yautja had been told. If this was the best he could do, he and his warriors would have many trophies to take home.